Murder on the beat.
What's up, guys? This might seem a little familiar to you. You might have seen this before, but let's go ahead and get started anyway. Let's get one thing out there. I love Kanye West. What I hate is that nowadays I always have to clarify that I don't actually love everything about my glorious 5'8" king. I just love the music that he creates. Now, the source of this constant clarification that we have in our society today is the evolution of public shame and cancel culture. More specifically, the fact that the very nature of cancel culture exacerbates the idea that a canceled individual also corrupts the abstract ideals that individual might uphold. What makes that scenario even worse is the perception we have that everyone, most notably celebrities, is tied to a scale of right or wrong, where if you're not right, you're wrong, and vice versa, with no in-between. Pushing this polar determination on society only further drives division and hostility between people. However, the very same power and the very same tool that allows us to cancel others is the one that allows us to band together as entire communities to help progress the world we live in. Especially with the modernization of society today, right now, that power is social media. Yet, public shaming continues to be a universal and timeless phenomenon regardless of technological advancement, perhaps even more so now. And so, with there being points on either extremity, we have to learn to compromise our power and control it properly so as to prevent the detriment of unassuming and innocent people. That's not to say Kanye is innocent. But as Kanye once said, he just wants to feel liberated. And the first step in doing so is by recognizing the dilemma that's confining him in the first place. Before social media and even before the internet, we as humans innately have found ways to shame others, whether that's for the sake of saving our own pride, getting revenge, or because of our bright neon outfit phase in the 80s. I know it's hard to look at. Regardless of the reason, shaming has been a natural human process since the beginning of humanity. In ancient times, we had public stonings as a form of punishment. And even just a couple years ago, specifically 1,991 years ago, biblical text outlines that Jesus' crucifixion can also be seen as public shaming as well. Okay, so maybe social media relatively is not that bad. However, what is concrete is that not always necessarily always bad. Social media has given us a route to perform public shaming much more frequently and much more potently. Not only do we now have the ability to use our little thumbs to ferociously type away at one-star Yelp reviews practically whenever we want to, but we can also find people who share the same opinions as us and create entire communities for the sole purpose of bringing one individual down. And out of all 99 of Iggy Azalea's problems, the normalization of canceling individuals is at the very top of them. Because the concern nowadays is less of the effect of the cancel on the person who is actually being canceled, but rather the effect that it has on their audience. Take, for example, again, Kanye. Kanye right now is most renowned for his outrageous statements ranging from his dislike of Taylor Swift in 2016, which in my opinion is actually not that outrageous at all, to his anti-Semitic comments, which ended up cutting almost all of his brand deals and ruined his reputation as an intergenerational artist. But instead of focusing on the repercussions Kanye faces because of his poor decisions, the public is much more keen to criticizing the music he's made instead. Individuals who listen to his music are now either having to hide their appreciation for music made in the past or be heavily criticized for their appreciation of that said music, when in truth, we have to learn to separate the art from the artist. And yes, that hate has died down over the past couple of years, but it still remains prevalent in today's society, relative to before the great canceling of 2022. Additionally, even if shaming is justified, the public needs to open their eyes to how massive shame can affect an individual. As Keon Hahn writes in his research paper regarding the effects of shame, specifically in the decision-making process, it becomes clear that extensive humiliation of an individual can affect their subconscious and how they respond to certain situations for the worse. In other words, the more indignity we as a society push onto an individual, the more likely the same individual will continue to make mistakes and fall into an endless cycle of corruption. Basak Bayatiyar and Tulan Genkaz also tell us that the effects of guilt can not only affect the individual in a cyclical manner, but can also affect the environment and the people around them as analyzed through the mediating roles of shame through parenting. This is made even worse by the fact that, as Pew Research Center expresses, Americans in particular seem to demand perfection from people with higher prestige, which only ends up making those negative effects worse for the people who are actually affected by them. Now, although that seems like common sense, the very fact that we continue to create pressure on canceled people long after they've been canceled shows that we as a society either can't and haven't been able to put together those dots, or we deliberately ignore them. If it's the former, our goal should be to raise awareness of the effects continuous shame can have. And if it's the latter, we as a collective need to change the way we think and completely reevaluate our priorities. It's also important to acknowledge that shame and cancel culture does not only pertain to celebrities. To further, Christine Roche writes to us that with the coming of the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of instances in which individuals were shamed increased dramatically as access to social media and the internet became much more ubiquitous, and as stigma with the pandemic increased among Asian Americans, as something that goes somewhat unnoticed, although heavily present. We also learned that the number of active social media users has increased by around 1.3 billion from 3.7 billion in 2020 to almost 5 billion in the year of 2024, exacerbating the issue even further. Now, if you're at all like Justin Bieber and you are yearning to be someone else, maybe probably don't do that. Because if society craves for the downfall of people who stand at a higher prestige, or even people at their own level, then naturally we need to learn to be content with the actions already made for the benefit of the most people possible. But as bad as shaming can get, for my love of Rihanna, I do have to swallow my own pride, because it has also been an integral part of progressing socially and societally. As I mentioned before, shame has been used since the beginning of humanity, and although oftentimes it can be used for the benefit of certain individuals and for the detriment of others, it can also be used for the benefit of an entire community just as frequently. The novel So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson explores the societal implications of public shame. He writes empirical uses of shame specifically through social media. One of the most notable examples is an instance where a community of people banding together led major companies such as LA Fitness to donate 39,000 pounds or 50,000 US dollars to European charities as a way to make up for the misconduct towards their customers. Social media is a massively powerful tool whenever you need to manipulate a certain situation, a certain person, or entire industries. The true power of social media in itself is not, The true power of social media in influencing large figureheads is not the innate nature of social media itself, but rather the collection of hundreds or thousands of people all working together to achieve a common goal. If the act of resilience was made by a single individual against LA Fitness, as Ronson points out, we would never have seen the larger effect it had regardless of societal reform social media grants us. We now have to raise the question, is shame in today's society exclusive to social media? And the resounding answer is no, absolutely not. It's also not just a tool used by civilians, as it's open to practically anyone in the world. Most notably, it's also open to law enforcement. Susie Kim outlines that recently, law enforcement has opened themselves up to the use of shame through the internet as a means to deter crime. By targeting individuals they've already caught and shaming them online, they aspire to drive away criminals from acting in the same way as their predecessors so as to prevent their own individual shaming. At the same time, law enforcement also uses the collective power of people with information on the internet to gather clues or hints about perpetrators to keep their streets without harm. TLDR, assuming that the moral implications of each instance are sound, shame can be used as a method to serve the community both in comfort and in safety. So then if we have two massive polarities of benefits and detriments, how can they possibly both coexist in one phenomenon? Well, that answer is also pretty simple. The answer is social media is not inherently harmful. What determines social media's use is not its nature, but rather the intentions projected by the users of social media. So in truth, the harm of cancel culture does not stem from canceling itself, but rather the societal evolution of specific incidents involving shame and the actors behind it themselves. And even though Taylor can make her bad guys good for the weekend, our solution has to last a lot longer than just 2 days. Because with there being both beneficial and harmful effects of shame, we can't possibly just settle for leaving the status quo the way it is right now, or outlawing shame completely. Like what? We can't do that anyway. And so we need to find a compromise. We have to collectively determine a way to harmonize the good and the bad and find a good middle ground. To protect relatively innocent people while also formulating a sense of justice, we have to, as Lori Penny writes to us, differentiate between outrage and justified behavior, specifically by regulating our response to certain situations. Of course, there's no law that can make shame situational, nor is there a way for a supreme deity to change our unwritten moral code. However, it still remains a necessity to prevent the mental repercussions of constant shaming and protect the people who fall victim to it. In which case, what we can do is raise awareness by either bringing up the implications of shame in conversation or in instances where you get to talk at people for 12 minutes at a time. It sounds stupid, but in doing so, we can continue to use social media and see its benefits while also decreasing the negative effects tied to it. I'm not some helicopter parent. I'm not saying we should outlaw all social media and keep you from playing Roblox in school, but what I do recommend is that maybe we should just take a step back and consider that maybe the sense of pride we feel when we destroy a person's career, maybe perhaps probably isn't so great for the person who just had their life ruined. In which case, we also need to find a middle ground. Naturally, there will be instances where we think that shaming a person or a whole industry is necessary, but extensive humiliation is not beneficial to the shamer or the person being shamed. It's like trying to bring down the entire school district after Ms. Roundtree misgraded your assignment. JK, she's a good teacher, she doesn't do that. All in all, shame is something we can all harness and use to the benefit of society, but it's also something that we shouldn't abuse. In which case, we need to come to consensus on how exactly we can manage our own desires and balance them with the negative effects they can have on individuals. Our impulses should not corrupt the lives of others. If we want to have moral ground, we need to have a common understanding. I'll continue to tell people that I love Kanye West music, but I hope that someday there won't be repercussions to loving him as a person as well. Thank you.